Hey everybody, this is Stephen Kennedy. I'm with the Fort Worth Astronomical Society Astrophotography Special Interest Group. I'm the chair of that committee, and today we're bringing you an exciting speaker, Charles Bracken, who is a published author and has put out at least three editions, with the fourth coming soon, of his imaging primer. And he's going to talk to us about that in just a minute. And we're also going to hear from Bob Circus, who's going to give us an update on our observatory on the dark sky site at Rising Star, the Noble Observatory, where we have Bortle 2 skies, and we've got a Rasa telescope uh, out there. And the committee, the Noble Observatory Committee, has been diligently working to get that up to speed so that the club will have that as a resource. And I'm very excited to see what Bob has to say about that. But I'll go ahead and get started by introducing today's speaker, Charles Bracken. He is the author of several books, including the three editions of what is probably the most well-known uh, uh, book, called the Deep Sky Imaging Primer, or Primer. How do you pronounce it, Charles?
Americans seem to say primer, British people seem to say primer, so either one's fine, I think.
Okay. Well, this book, and so this is the third edition, but I understand he's got a fourth edition coming out, and that fourth edition will have his secret sauce, the workflow that he uses, which he's gonna bring to us tonight. And so I'm very excited about that. I do want to let you know that this meeting is being recorded, and we are going to put it on YouTube for people to watch later on. And y'all are encouraged to go and get the hard copy volumes of his book, or you can get the PDF version, which is also available. And uh, that's also a wonderful addition. All right, so now I'm going to click stop screen share. There we go. And uh, hand it over to Charles. Charles, why don't you begin by telling us what got you into astrophotography and led you down this path, and then tell us about your workflow.
Yeah, awesome. All right, thank you for having me. Thanks for the introduction, Stephen. Let me just go ahead and get the presentation queued up here. Yeah, so like a lot of people, I had a 60 millimeter refractor as a kid, the department store kind, and I saw the images in astronomy and sky and telescope and magazines like that, and I thought, man, I want to do that someday, but never really was able to get anything to work back in the film days. This would have been, in the 80s and early 90s. But then when I got my first full-time job, I told myself that with the signing bonus that I got, I would take a small chunk of the signing bonus, like $1,000, and just figure out something I wanted to do as a kid and go do it. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to get a DSLR and a telescope, and I'm going to go do that thing I wanted to do as a kid. So that was 18 years ago. And I've been doing astrophotography ever since, and just sort of moving up the ladder with all the new technology. So tonight I'm going to go through some examples of image processing, and I titled the talk "Efficient Post Processing in Pixinsight" because I had to get pretty efficient at this process, and I'll talk about why. And everything I'm going to do tonight is in Pixinsight. Now, that the principles will apply to any software, but I find that just sort of sticking to one program in Pixinsight right now is still the most advanced and complete imaging processing stack that we have right now. So let me go into it. So yes, so as you mentioned, I've written several books. My most recent one is The Astrophotographer's Universe. That's I don't have a copy of it handy here, but that's a 6.5 pound, 700 page hardcover encyclopedia of Pretty much my goal was to take everything you could ever want to take a picture of with a telescope and put it in that book. I live in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. I'm north of Philadelphia, so like Bortle 5, maybe plus a little bit on that these days. But I mostly shoot now remotely. So I've got a scope homed at Utah Desert Remote Observatories and one at Deep Sky Chile that I split. So that's a really great way if you want to, if you get a couple people together to split a remote telescope, if you haven't gotten into that and you live under light polluted skies, it's a good solution. Or it sounds like you guys have one in the works there for your club, which is an even better solution. But there's my contact information. I'll bring this up at the end as well. So I have been starting a lot of my recent talks with just a couple of slides, just as a reminder about how good we have it right now as astrophotographers. I'm going to lay out a quick framework for image processing, and then I'm going to go through 4 examples, so at least 3 if we have time. I'll get to the 4th because I know continuum subtraction was something, Stephen, you mentioned the members were interested in learning a little more about. We are in a golden age of astrophotography. I've heard a lot of people say things like this. I like to just bring it to life with an example of the California Nebula and E. Bernard, who took this shot on the left, which was amazing at the time. This is with a incredibly fast, I think like f1 portrait lens. This is 6 hours. This is an amazing. You can imagine him hand tracking the exposures all night long in the freezing cold on Mount Wilson. He had to use donkeys to bring up the water so that he could process his wet plates on the mountain. I set my telescope up back in 2021, set things up in Nina, went to sleep, and then the next morning processed it, and I get a great image. So things have progressed amazingly, obviously, since 1891. But you mentioned earlier what got me into astrophotography, and I always show this image. This is David Malin's famous image on the cover of National Geographic in 1983, and he was a pioneer of color astrophotography. And this was absolute state of the art. It's still a beautiful image, but you can see, now again, like from your backyard, you can outperform in a couple of hours what really took the Kit Peak telescope and the best photographer in the world in 1983 to accomplish. So we do live in a golden age. I wanted to capture every possible deep sky object you could want to image. That was my goal with the Astrophotographer's Universe, which is now out. But that presented me with the challenge of having about 2,000 images to process. So I can't say that I started with a specific workflow and I worked through it like a menu, but when you're processing that many images, it becomes almost habitual. And so I wanted to sort of process a few images here. These are all fresh processes that I just did over the past few days and walk you through what it is really like. And the big thing I want to highlight here is that there's no one way to process images. There's no script you can follow. There are sort of some frameworks you can use. But even if I were to do most of these images again, I'd probably do them slightly differently. If you gave me the same data and had me start over, I might make slightly different choices. So this is not an example of how the right way to process images. This is just one way to do it, and highlighting some tips and tricks that may be pretty efficient, because I pretty much had to process most of these images in 10 to 15 minutes for the most part. These images are otherwise the book never was going to come out. So just a couple notes about my philosophy, what you're going to see. I do use Pixinsight pretty much beginning to end, but the principles here are going to apply to any software, whatever you want to use. I stick mostly with the core tools. I think that's just easier from a didactic purpose of showing you what things are. It's hard to understand if it's some weird obscure script and it's got 16 different parameters to it. I try to stick with the core things. And frankly, for the most part, that's all you need for most of what we're going to do. The Pixinsight philosophy is that in general, you don't paint things in manually. You do things, you apply them to the whole image, or you do them like masking, for instance, you create based on the attributes and qualities of the image, not painting things in. So that's the way Pixinsight is designed. I think they originally called it the photojournalistic school of astrophotography. And I try to keep things relatively natural looking. Colors aside for narrowband images, of course, but I don't like them completely, with all the noise blasted out of them. The color is not too hyperbolic. That said, I have to balance that with the expectations. Astroben there tends to be a style that's very colorful and very noise reduced. So I try to meet that in the middle a little bit. I can't say how the images are going to look for you necessarily. I have learned that Zoom drops the bit depth of them and seems to make some choices of stretching it or something in the process of displaying them. So they may not look as good on your view as they do on my screen. So I'm always a little wary that I'm showing images and people are like, that looks terrible. What is he doing? And it looks great on my end. So just be aware they might look different between your screen and mine. So I mentioned, there's not a recipe, but you can think of image processing in some fairly discrete steps, and that there's a general order at least, and we can call that a framework here. So I'm going to start all of these examples this evening with a stacked image. I'm not going to go through stacking and everything. You can use lots of different software to use that to stack your images. And I'm going to assume we've already sort of done the basic color combination for the most part, that we're coming in with an image that's either an RGB image where we've combined the colors, or you've done narrowband, but you already synthesized and chose your palette, whether it's HOO or SHO or whatever. You're coming in, we're going to start there. The dotted line here is the sort of linear versus nonlinear phases. And most of you probably already know that things like deconvolution, gradient correction, and even color calibration, if done this way, need to be done on a linear image. Then we'll switch it. And then things get a little less defined in terms of the sequencing that you do things. But in general, I'm going to do noise reduction. And I show here some of the tools that I use. Then in general, contrast enhancements fall in the next part of the sequence. And then finally, there's a lot of time spent sort of iteratively touching up the image to get it where you want it to go. So I'm going to start with, go sort of progressively more complex examples here and what I'm going to do is I'm going to show every step in processing, why I did it, and then at the end come back and show how well did what I did sort of match this framework? Like how far away did I stray from this? What did I add? What tweaks did I do off of this basic path? So the first object I want to look at is an open cluster. It's called NGC 6231. You don't see it a ton. It is actually very bright, and it's one of the objects, a couple dozen objects that the monk Giovanni Hodierna discovered in the 1650s. And this was lost to history for the most part, but really some of the earliest, he was one of the earliest attempts to catalog things in the sky that were not stars that he noticed. This was before the telescope. But the fact that he noticed it indicates that it is fairly bright. So it only required an hour and a half of total exposure time. I think all the images I'm showing here tonight, I think I took all these at Utah Desert Remote. So these are under dark skies. These are all with the Tech 160 and Antlia filters. But this is just 10 exposures, 3 minutes each. So a half hour, red, green, and blue. But that's really all you need for something like an open cluster, right? We're not seeking the really faint parts of this object. So here is the raw image, and this is coming straight out of, and this is with the screen transfer function applied, so you can see it. But this is the raw image. The first thing I noticed, just looking at it, is while it's a nice cluster, got these stars. I actually don't know if they're part of the cluster. I'm guessing these are more like foreground stars, given their size and brightness. They're kind of distracting me over here. I also noticed that there's this red glow in the background. So clearly there's some H alpha here. And if I picked it up with only 10 exposures per channel, it's probably pretty bright. So it's actually on my to-do list now to go back and reshoot and get some H alpha data to incorporate here, because I think that could improve this image a lot. But at the point we process this image, we just have RGB and just 30 minutes per channel. So I mentioned those were distracting stars. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to crop it. And I chose to crop it. I'm going to keep the rectangular aspect ratio, and I'm going to crop out those bright and distracting stars so we can focus on the cluster a little bit. This is pretty straightforward. And you guys can chime in if you have questions as we go here.
Yep.
Then I might normally apply for most objects at this stage, I would apply Blur Exterminator, right? This is the time for deconvolution. We won't get into the debate about whether how much at Blur Exterminator actually is or isn't deconvolution, but we'll take Russ Croman at his word that effectively it is local decon. I'm going to choose not to do that. And it's very rare that I wouldn't, but the subject of this image is stars. And so I think I'm just going to leave it alone. So I'm actually I'm not going to run that here. And I'm just going to leave it as is. But I do need to do color calibration, and I'm going to use the the spectrographic version of that I'll show in a second. But before we can do that, we have to plate solve the image. So quick and relatively painless to use image solver these days to plate solve the image. And now we can run spectrophotometric color calibration. You just enter your sensor and your filters and everything like that. I generally use the average spiral galaxy as the white point. This is an arbitrary decision. This is, I think, generally what is most commonly recommended, but it's a whole philosophical question about how do you define white in space. On Earth, white is effectively defined as the spectrum of our sun and the interaction with the relative sensitivity of our eyes. But in space, like things are not illuminated by the sun. They are their own suns. And so, but this is generally a very good choice. I have never used anything else, but you might get slightly different results if you did. Other than that, I left things the defaults. It gives you a quick check to show you these plots, and your little dots should generally align mostly along the lines. I've actually never had them not do that. I think if you have maybe some severe light pollution or something like that, it might cause them to not line up, but they generally align. It's just a check to do. All right, so now we've got an image that it's still linear, but it's been color calibrated. Now we need to stretch it. So stretching it here, I often start with the default screen transfer stretch and then drag that onto histogram transformation. But I can immediately see that when I do that here and I look at it with the auto stretch applied, the screen stretch applied, I can see that those stars they quickly go to white, and they're very bright. They're going to lose all their color saturation. So I am going to not use the default STF stretch here. I'm going to modify it just a little bit. I do this pretty often, especially when you've got some really bright stuff. But we don't have to modify it a ton, though. So here, and I'm actually going to do this one in stages, because what I've decided I'm going to do here is something very risky. I'm going to do a masked stretch. I really try to avoid, unless I feel like I have to, using a mask and then doing any kind of stretching. Mask stretch for me tends to generate this very artificial look. The mask stretch function in Pixinsight. And anytime you're like messing with the brightness of things with a mask, it's very easy to reveal the mask in the final image or create something that looks artificial. So I don't usually do it, but I'm going to do it here. And I think I pull it off relatively well. But again, this just goes to show you can take a million different approaches to these things. But what I did was I just backed off the automatic stretch a little bit with that midpoint slider. And you can see I've turned on the real-time preview so you can see what it looks like. And I'm kind of like halfway stretching this image just to ease into it a little bit. Then I use range selection to build a mask, and I've set the upper limit really high here because all I want to do is I just want to pick up. I just trying in this range selection using the preview to pick up just the cores of all these stars, because now I'm going to stretch again, but I don't want to stretch the cores any further. I want them to stay. Actually, I'll go back a slide. You can see I circled at the bottom. When I put it doesn't pick it up, but when I put the cursor over the core of these brightest stars, they're not at like 0.99. They're 0.95 to 0.98. So there's still some color that's going to be left in those. So I want to protect that. I don't want to apply further stretching to them. So I'm going to create a mask and apply it. And here's what it looks like applied. And then I'm going to stretch again. And again, I'm sort of easing into it. So I'm going to stretch again. Then I'm going to repeat the process one more time. I'm going to take this newly stretched image. I'm going to use that to create, I'm going to use range selection to create a new mask, apply that mask, and then stretch one more time. And what I'm looking for is I'm stretching until the background of the image is somewhere around 0.2. So these lines, this is divided into quarters, so that I know that this line is 0.25. So this is probably like, 0.15 or something like that. So I know I'm getting there as far as the stretch. Then I'm going to create yet another mask. And again, this is a much more normal mask. So now I'm going to try to gather a lot more of the image, trying to get all the stars in the mask, because now I'm going to use this mask to protect the background, and I'm going to boost the color saturation of the stars. So I create this mask. This is what it looks like applied. And then I use curves transformation just to boost the overall color saturation of the parts that are not hidden by the mask. And here's what the result you end up with. Then I look at my histogram and I go, man, like there's a lot of wasted dynamic range in this left edge. So I'm going to move that black point up until it starts clipping a little bit. And then to compensate, I'm going to move the mid-tone slider to the left a little bit left of center. And there's our final image. So the goal here, this is a relatively simple, about as simple as it gets open cluster. Those are about the simplest thing to process, but you can see I strayed a little bit from the standard protocol because I could see that it had some really, really bright stars in the core, and I knew I needed to protect their color as much as I could. This cluster, unfortunately, is all the main stars are blue. So you only have these really much more fainter background stars that are orange. So it's not particularly photogenic because it doesn't really have that nice orange-blue color contrast in the center, but still it's an interesting object. So just to recap, here's the original sort of framework that I showed, and you can see that already with a simple open cluster, I decided, nope, I'm not going to use deconvolution. I actually didn't need to do gradient correction of this particular image. And then I, did the stretch, but I did it with a iterative approach using masks. There was no contrast enhancement necessary because it's an open cluster, like it's already incredibly contrasty. And then the touch-ups, you can see sort of what I did here was just mostly just boosting the color saturation of the stars. So that's the simple one. That's the easy approach. Before I move on, so our next object's going to be M51. This one's a little more complicated, but also a lot prettier and a lot more interesting. Any questions about the process so far? All right. All right, so M51. If you're like me, every time this comes into view, it's hard to resist shooting it. It is just such a pretty galaxy. It's got a lot going on. It's relatively large. It's perfectly face on. It's colliding with another galaxy. So it's just a fantastic object. This is 6 total hours of exposure time, 3-minute exposures, 40 per channel. Again, taken under pretty dark skies at Utah Desert Remote. So this is what the image looks like right out of color combination, still raw, showing this with screen transfer function on. But I can see it's got a lot of promise already. It's got pretty good signal to noise ratio. I know that because I know I can see pretty far out into this tidal tail. I'm like, well, that's really good. It doesn't appear to have any real gradient here, and unlike previous images that I'd taken from my backyard, this is my first image taken from the dark skies of Utah. This one does not have a nasty color cast to it from light pollution. So I have another image that I actually used in the book, and I'll show it at the end of this, that I took with a larger scope, but I took it under light polluted conditions. So I immediately felt like, wow, there's no gradients, there's no ugly color cast in this image. This is going to be a lot more fun to process. Now I can see it's, with the screen transfer function on, it always stretches pretty aggressively. This is 6 hours total exposure time. Could I have gone 12, 18, something like that, and be a little less noisy? Yes, probably, but we're going to go with this because actually under dark skies, the 6 hours was more than adequate. So the first thing I decided to do was do decom with blur exterminator. In this case, actually, in retrospect, I would have had to sharpen non-stellar higher because there's a lot of fine little dust lanes that I probably would want to target in the middle here. I'd forgotten I had tweaked this for a previous image I was working on. It wasn't set to the defaults. It was set to a lower number, but I think it's still okay. And we'll fix that later. I went to apply gradient correction, and I have to say I was used to use DBE all the time, dynamic background extraction. I have to say, and I never felt ABE and Pixinsight did a very good job. The new gradient correction tool in general is I find really good because I don't have a lot of light pollution with these images taken from dark skies. I always use the simplified model with a degree of 1. So that basically means it's really just looking for a general like left to right cast or top to bottom or diagonal, but like just kind of a linear cast, usually because maybe the horizon was close to one side or the moon was, one quarter moon was in the sky or something in one direction. But just I know that I can use the simplified model when I've got dark skies. When I did that, though, and it might not be super apparent here, I felt like it was creating an artificial dark spot here where the arrow is. And so I can see where it can do that. And I could have gone into DBE and placed the points manually and done all that, but I thought, you know what, it seems really minor. So I'm just going to forego gradient correction on this image entirely. Again, the benefits of having really dark skies out there, you may not even have to do gradient correction. Now, again, I know I'm going to do color calibration. Color calibration is really important for galaxies. It's especially a big galaxy like this where you're trying to, it's the feature of the image. So I don't always do color calibration for RGB images, but most of them I do. And in particular, for a galaxy like this, it's going to be very important. So we're going to plate solve it so we can set it up to do the spectrophotometric color calibration. We're going to run that. Same settings as last time. You can see everything, a lot fewer stars to work with, but they do line up along the line. And notice immediately how much bluer the galaxy got. There's a great improvement. So I'll go back a couple of slides so you can see. So you can see how yellow and green the cast was, and then you properly align the colors, and you get a much more pleasing image right away. Now, and that's right. I forgot. I made a slide to illustrate the side by side. And this is, green is in the middle of the spectrum. Our eyes are most sensitive to it. It's almost always images in astronomy are going to end up starting out with a green cast. Okay, so yet again, I start with the screen transfer function default stretch, linked channels, apply that to histogram transformation, and I decided it's just a little bit too much for me, so I just backed off that midpoint slider just a little bit so that it wasn't quite so aggressive. So you can see I just scooched it over a little bit, and with the real-time preview turned on, this looks a lot better, and I can see there's still some remaining detail in the core. That's the part I'm trying to protect here, is I'm trying to keep this core from completely blowing out. It should be a lot brighter. It is a lot brighter than the arms of the galaxy. You don't want to flatten it completely, but you want to be able to preserve it so that you can salvage a little bit of detail in it later. So I just backed off just a little bit from the standard stretch. And here you can see after that the result. And I was just noting here that if I had left the standard stretch on, the standard stretch in SDF is to get the background, so the basically the peak of this histogram, to 0.25, and it ended up at about 0.2. So like I'm totally okay with that. That's fine. And we're going to make some subsequent adjustments later anyway. So now we're going to do some noise reduction with noise exterminator. And the point I wanted to make here is look what happens to the histogram. So let me go back a slide. You can see, so the peak is at 0.2, but you can see how wide it is. You apply a noise reduction like this, and it just smushes that whole histogram in, right? And I don't want to apply it at, I think the default in noise exterminator these days is 0.9. I almost always back that off to 0.75 or 0.8. I think we can always do more noise reduction later. I don't want the image to look too artificial. And the star removal tools, I use StarNet in particular, seem to need just a little bit of noise still in there to effectively remove all the stars. They tend to work better when you don't remove all the noise. So I used it at about 0.75 for this image. And here's what it looks like when you apply StarNet. Now we can really see the galaxy. It's not often that I am going to do a starless processing approach for a galaxy, but for a large galaxy like this, where it's the feature, it's taking up a lot of space in the image. I think it's definitely worth it. Those bright stars that are foreground stars overlaid on top of it can make processing the galaxy a little more difficult. And these days, star removal tools are so easy. You might as well remove the stars and work with the two separately between the galaxy and the stars. All right, so now that the histogram has been smushed here, we can definitely move the black point over. That's just wasted dynamic range, and you can even see that. Like moving the black point slider over only clipped 7 pixels, right? So this is probably at this point 40 megapixels after cropping this image. So totally fine to clip 7. You could clip a lot more than that if you wanted. For other objects like nebulae, I almost always, and we will later, move the black point or the white point slider over as well. But here, this is a galaxy and it's got a lot of pixels that are very close to the top. So that white point slider is as far over as it can be, because there are a lot of pixels in this core that are at 0.99, and so we can't touch that. So this is the result after cutting the black point over. We didn't actually clip any material number of pixels, so it just maintains the brightness and reallocates the dynamic range much better. Okay, so let me go back a slide. So you can see, I mentioned earlier, there's still a little bit of detail in that core, and I want to highlight it. When you have lost detail to areas that are too bright, as long as those areas are not clipped, they're not sitting at a value of 1, the tool to use in Pixinsight is generally this HDR multi-scale transform. Now in this case, it's got this option, you can use the median version or not. When you're working starless like this, you don't have to worry about some of the ringing problems and everything that come with the normal functionality. If you're working with stars, I think you usually want to use the median transform. It doesn't matter too much in this case, but you can see this is what it looks like at 100% intensity. And you can see it does recover a lot of the details. It allows you to see sort of further down into that spiral. But I think in general, putting it at full strength like this doesn't look particularly natural to me. It's flattened the galaxy's brightness out a lot. That's what HDRMT does. It sort of tends to make everything look really flat, which is unnatural. Like I said, that core should be a lot brighter than the arms. So I decided to apply it at about a 0.3, and you can see what that looks like here. So this I felt was a much more natural approach to it. It allowed me to pull out some of the detail on the core without making the galaxy look completely flat. Okay. Now, I want to just boost these tidal tails just a little bit. So I used the cursor, just the natural mouse cursor, and just left clicked in some of the fainter parts of it. And that allowed me to see on the histogram here where that level of brightness lies. So all I did on the curves tool was I just used it to just bump that area up a little bit. And for the most part, I put anchoring points above and below it to sort of keep the line straight above it. Actually, the first anchor point I used just to subtly scooch the darker area down a little bit. But I made sure that this area was just slightly boosted above a diagonal line, just trying to help me emphasize that tidal tail a tiny bit. All right, now we're going to add the stars back. So the image with all the stars in it was created automatically by StarNet. It was called star_mask. And in this case, it was actually just fine to literally just add them back with pixel math. So this $capital T is the code in pixel math for whatever image you're dragging onto. And then that was the starless image. And then so just add the star mask. So literally just adding it back in. I don't usually do it this way, but this actually works out fine for this image. We'll do a more sophisticated approach later. Very simple color saturation boost using curves. Now we're starting to look a little more like what you expect this galaxy to look like, with the bluish arms, the yellow core, the yellow galaxy it's colliding with, and then you can even start to see the magenta H2 regions in the galaxy start to stand out. And as I mentioned before, the peak of the background was around 0.2, and usually this is the point of the image processing stage where I just sort of walk away for a couple minutes and come back to the monitor, and inevitably I'm like, yeah, the whole image needs to be brighter. You get used to it, you're like absorbed in it, you've kind of fallen into the image, and then you take a step back and be like, nope, needs to be brighter. And so all this was just taking the midtone slider and just moving it over and just boosting the whole image a little bit. And I find that I almost always end up with that peak between 0.2 and 0.25 as what's most satisfying to me. And then because I stretched it, it actually needs color saturation, because every time you stretch an image, you're pushing all three color channels up closer to one. And as they get higher and higher, there's less difference between them. And so you need to give them a little more color saturation to make those colors stand out. So just a quick boost to color saturation. And then I zoomed in, and I noticed that this is a kind of a classic problem. Even after the SPCC we did earlier, I still have a background that just looks really got that green color to it. Easiest way to get rid of that is SCNR. I don't usually apply it at 100%. I scale it back. I've seen a lot of stuff, and I chimed in, I think, on Cloudy Nights a little bit about this, that SCNR is only destructive to images if you uncheck this preserve lightness. It is checked by default. You should always have it checked, and it's just fine to use it to get rid of green color casts, and you're not really damaging your data. It's not something really to worry about as long as that preserve lightness box is checked. So then I looked around and I said, it's not green anymore, but this background has a lot of little models of color. I wonder if I can get rid of that. So I went back to an old tool that I still like for color noise reduction, for chrominance noise reduction. And I just quickly applied ACDNR, which is that tool, but I found that it was reducing the magenta H2 regions too much in the galaxy. Now, I could just mask the galaxy, with that brightness mask and protect it and apply ACDNR to the background. But then I kind of looked at it, I was like, no, you know what? It's fine. I'm overthinking this. I'm probably going to make the image look too unnatural. Really, the right thing to do probably to go shoot more data if I wanted this image to look a lot better and have less noise in it. So I'm going to leave it alone. I'm going to undo this and take a step back and not do ACDNR. But I did go ahead and create another mask. So again, my go-to tool there is for range selection. And as I mentioned before, I don't like to use masks with brightness adjustments. When you're using them for color adjustments and things like that, you don't even actually have to worry too much about the blurring of it, the smoothness slider. And you don't have to worry about that too much, because the eye is not going to zone in on differences that are slightly more or less color saturated as easily. So this is what it looks like. So I went ahead and boosted the color saturation a little more. And then what I did was I inverted the mask and then inverted what I did. So invert the mask, now protect the galaxy, protect the stars, reveal the background, and then desaturate. So this is what I ended up doing basically. Instead of ACDNR, instead of using that tool, I just said, listen, I can just mask it and just desaturate the background a little bit with curves. Now I made just a slight adjustment to the background a little bit just to darken it. And then I looked at it and I said, this is another moment where, like, you step away. I'm going, The magenta looks beautiful. I love how these H2 regions look, but this whole thing looks really cold. This image looks too blue to me. So quick adjustment there. Just isolate the red channel with histogram transformation, boost that a little bit, and now you warmed up the whole image a lot. Looks much more natural to me. So this is the final image. Just rotate it a little bit here. Pretty good, I think, for a 6-inch refractor and only 6 hours of data. It's still a little noisy. Again, I'll probably go back and take 12 or 18 at this point.
Okay. Yeah, I've got it going here.
And
go ahead. What's up, Kent?
Oh, I'm just checking up to see where all of Mr. Dietz's things are.
Okay.
I found his car.
oh, Steve, I think you're
Okay.
And
Chris, can you mute? There we go.
I just muted Steve. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, so this is I think a pretty good image for a 6-inch refractor, but I want to show you a comparison. So it's not as sharp, I think, as it could be. It's still pretty sharp, but I had another image I'd already taken from my backyard, also about 6 hours worth of exposure time already, but I used a 10-inch reflector, so an SCA 260. And just to show you that result, similar amount of depth, I think, but you can tell how the 10-inch reflector, that larger aperture did give it a much better resolution, I think, right? So M51 is a large galaxy. It's still a relatively small object. And so let me just go back and show you. This is the 6-inch refractor. And I think this is, processed, I think, as well as I could to reveal the details. But same amount of data with a 10-inch reflector had higher resolution. That said, it was my light polluted backyard, so had a lot more gradients and other issues to deal with there. Okay, so how does that compare to the sort of standard framework I laid out earlier? Everything before the stretch was exactly the same. I chose to separate the stars, and that allowed me to do the contrast enhancement stage to the starless part of the object. So we did this sort of HDR flattening of the brightnesses, and then did curves just to increase the overall contrast, and then added the stars back. Then in the touch-up phase, this was basically masking, improving saturation, reducing color noise, and then adjusting the color balance. So that was pretty much aligned with the standard processing framework. Okay, any questions before I go on to the third object? Okay. Now we're going to get a lot more obscure. So we're going to go from M51 to Wolf-Rayet 16. So this is a much less commonly shot object. It's very faint. It's very unique looking. I like it a lot. As I learned though, after shooting 18 hours of exposure time, it emits almost exclusively in H alpha. In fact, I think it may. I could not, after 125 exposures, 5 minutes each in the oxygen channel, I couldn't pick up any signal at all. So I shot this and I'm using an HOO palette, but effectively the oxygen is only contributing to the blue, and give me a reasonable approximation of star color. It's not actually contributing much of anything to the nebula. So when shooting narrowband, the framework is modified just a little bit, in that for the most part, I'm not going to use color calibration because there really isn't a true color for narrowband images. We don't have to get into the philosophical arguments there. You can technically create something much closer to a true color image, but frankly, I don't think you want to do that with narrowband data because in most cases, it would just be very, very red and you would exclude the other channels. Interestingly, in this case, the red actually is the only thing we've got because this object was only emitting in hydrogen. But in general, we don't have to do color calibration for narrowband only objects. And then separating the stars and doing the contrast enhancements, just like we did for M51, is pretty much standard practice for me. I'm going to pull the stars out, and that's going to allow me to do a lot more interesting things to the nebula, and then recombine the stars. Okay, so let's jump in. So this is what the object looks like for the raw image. So very, very faint, requires a lot of stretching, even with 18 hours of exposure time. And most of the time, objects this faint, you're going to want to turn on the 24-bit higher resolution screen stretch just to see it, so it's not so it's going to look a little more reasonable. Going to just do a crop. I'm going to crop out all the fringing right away. I'm probably going to crop this more later, I know, but I'm going to just crop the areas where we have sort of non-overlapping parts of the alignment there on the edges. And then I'm going to go do just a little bit of gradient correction, because the first thing I notice is that the bottom right has this green cast to it that the upper left does not. So there's probably a little bit of a gradient there. And again, I'm going to use the simplified model just of degree 1. And you can see that seemed to fix it up nicely. And now we can apply Blur Exterminator. And now I've returned to just the defaults, right? I think these are the default values for Blur Exterminator. And I'm interested in both reducing the prominence of the stars and then also sharpening some of the fine details I know that lie in here that we're going to see in a minute. Okay, we've done that. Now I'm going to apply histogram transformation. And in this case, it was literally just the standard STF stretch. I didn't have to tweak it at all. This image needs a lot of stretching. And so it was completely fine to apply it with the standard curve. And this is just to show what that curve looks like after the stretch. You can see it stretches it right to a median background value of 0.25. Okay, so obviously the image is pretty noisy, so I'm going to run Noise Exterminator. I'm going to run it at 0.8, and just to show you what that looks like. So here's a quick before and after. These faint objects like this, these really faint nebulae, take a lot of noise reduction because you are really pushing the data. Even with 18 hours of exposure time, I was really pushing it throughout the process here. Okay, then we're going to run StarNet. We're going to remove the stars. And this, now we can see what this nebula looks like and see how interesting it is. I think it's been called the Southern Raspberry Nebula or something like that. It looks like this spiky ball. It's a very intriguing object. Here's what the stars look like. Everything looks fine there, except the stars look green. This is very typical for an HOO palette image where oxygen has been applied to the green and the blue channels, comprises the green and blue channels. So I'm just going to immediately fix that, just do SCNR, and now we've got stars that are much more blue and orange spectrum stars. All right, now this is the very standard process that I do for starless noise-reduced images. So once the stars have been removed and you've reduced the noise, you can almost always move the black point way up and the white point inward. So I think this is the key to getting the most out of nebula images with noise reduction like this. Now that we can remove the stars, you've taken the stars out, which had all the bright pixels. And you've got this incredibly faint object. Now I can fill the entire dynamic range by moving both those sliders in until they just start clipping, and try to keep it down to, like, less than a 1/10 of a percent, in this case 1/100 of a percent or less. But you kind of judge it based on how it looks. But you can smush both of those in, and that is using the tiny bit of dynamic range that the nebula has and sort of filling the whole dynamic range of the image. Now we're starting to really see what this object looks like. You can use range selection again to create a mask, because now I want to go in and do some contrast enhancement, but I want to do that only to the places where there's nebulosity. I don't want to apply that to the background. So I know that these tiny little features are the ones that I'm most interested in. These little plucks or tufts or spikes or whatever on this object. So, and I know they've got a pretty small scale. So I use local histogram equalization, and I move the kernel size around, but I know it's going to be a fairly small number. So 50 is a pretty small number to use here. I almost never use this. It's very easy to overdo LHE, so I'm only going to apply it with an amount of 40 here. But you can see how nicely it's starting to reveal the 3D shape of this object. Now we're going to take the mask off, and I'm going to apply just an overall contrast enhancement curve, or really this isn't even a contrast enhancement for the most part. This is really just darkening the background at this point in the image using curves. And now we need to add the stars back. So before, with M51, when I removed the stars, I just added them back. This is a formula that I've created to blend two different approaches. So the left part is just adding the stars back. So you can see this is just original image plus star mask. Just add the stars back. If I know it, I know if I do that, wherever there is bright nebulosity, though, when you add the star in, it's going to cause the star to clip. It's going to go, by adding the two, it's going to exceed 1, and it's just going to get clipped at a value of 1. So the normal solution to that would be to add them with the screen method, and that's this function here. That's these inverse. This is the screen method. So this is like in Photoshop when you use the screen layers mode. I know, however, when I do this, that works for the bright parts of the image, but for stars that are just sitting on a more or less black background, they tend to look artificially dim. So what this formula does is it applies more of the simple addition where it does these two things in proportion to the brightness. So an object or a part where the star is at 0.5 brightness, it's going to get half of each of these. If a star is placed over nebulosity that's already, let's say, at 0.9, it's going to get 0.9 of the screen and 0.1, the remainder of the addition. So I'm basically taking these two different ways of adding the stars back and applying them in proportion to how bright the area you're adding the star back is. I find this is kind of my one size fits all, rather than trying to tweak things. There are I've seen lots of different formulas for people adding stars back into images. This is the one that I use almost universally these days. All right. The color balance just looks too blue to me. So if I go back, you can see I felt this background looked too blue. So then I just targeted a little bit of color balance adjustment here to make that background a little bit more neutral. And then I looked at it and I said, the star of this image is that ball in the middle, and it's getting lost. Like, it's really interesting. There's this nest of stuff around it, but it's too small in the image. So first I thought I would crop it like this, and I decided I did this and I backed up and I said, that's too sterile because now you got a square with a circle in it. It's just too symmetrical in all dimensions. So I changed my mind and I said, no, I'm going to do something more like this. I'm going to crop it in a rectangle. Felt a little more dynamic to me. So that's how I ended up cropping it. Then I decided, even though I've already applied noise reduction, because we've stretched it so aggressively, it's revealing the noise again. Usually you're in danger territory if you're applying noise reduction sort of fully twice like this. It means you probably overstretched the image, but this is just so faint. I went ahead and applied it again, and I think it turned out okay there. And then looking at the image, I also felt, because there was really no oxygen signal, the only color contrast I have in the image are a couple of these stars over here on the left that are blue. So I used the color saturation tool, and this allows you to target to boost the saturation of just a range of the spectrum. So I sort of targeted the blues and boosted that to give myself a little bit more color contrast. And then I still decided, like, nope, I still want to zoom in even further, even though I felt like I was wasting all this sensor real estate that I had. I was wasting it, but no, like, the star of the show here is this raspberry thing in the middle. So let me crop it in a little more. I still want to show this nest, and I like the diagonal arrangement of those streaks, but I want this object to be bigger in the frame. So that's what I did. And then, as always, I walked away from the computer and I came back and I said, I like it. On AstroBin, I know you're up against a lot of color saturation, a lot of brightness, so I'm going to go ahead and boost that a good bit more. So this is just a basic histogram midtone stretch, and this was the final image. So I just posted this like less than a week old, I think just a couple of days ago. So what did we do? Pretty much followed what I mentioned was the sort of the standard process for narrowband objects. but the choice of tools in particular. So applying local histogram equalization, because in this case, and doing that with a mask applied, because I knew I had a particular scale feature that I wanted to sort of target in there. And then the touch-ups were mostly cropping and color balance and color saturation. And then uniquely for this image, I did apply noise reduction. I rarely come back and apply more after applying so much earlier, but this image just demanded it. Okay. Any questions on that? And I know we're kind of at time. Would you like for me to go into the continuum subtraction example?
Actually, we're doing fantastic on the time.
Okay.
So I would love to see you talk about continuum subtraction, what it is, when you use it, why you use it, should you use it, do you care? That kind of thing.
Do you care? I kind of
Yeah.
agree sometimes. Like I care, maybe not as much as people on the internet care sometimes. So great questions, all of them. Okay, so in general, continuum subtraction is only applicable where you have a narrowband signal, and that's typically going to be H alpha, and a red and a broadband signal. If it's H alpha, then it's going to be the corresponding red signal that's in the broadband spectrum in the same area. So it's what you're trying to do is you're saying I've got usually like something like a reflection nebula, and it's got an emission nebula overlaid on top of it. And I want to pull those two things apart so that I can process and enhance and bring out the faint features of the emission component of the nebula that I capture with my narrowband filter, but I want to do that separately from the reflection nebula. Or the other example is usually I've got H2 regions and maybe some like H2 halo in a galaxy, and I need to pull that out and separate it because if I were to try to attack it together with the broadband part of the galaxy, it's gonna overdo it for the broadband parts. So it doesn't come up that often. I'll be honest with you, like when you look at examples online of this, what you're going to see is the same 3 or 4 objects keep coming up as the ones that people use as the examples for continuum subtraction, because they're kind of the ones that make the most sense. It's not super common, and it's not 100% necessary. It's helpful for this small set of objects. And in general, your red, like an RGB image, the red is going to pick up the H alpha. The H alpha is glowing in red. It's going to be picked up by the red filter in RGB. This is a situation where there's something that's really faint in there that you want to highlight. So you're going to see M78. That's the example I'm going to show you here. M82 and that crazy, flare, that bipolar flare coming out of M82 that you see in H alpha. I've seen like M106. But beyond this small set of objects, it's tedious, it's time consuming. This is a hard thing to do. There's not like one agreed upon method for doing it. A lot of it is kind of an estimation. So don't think this is something you have to do for a lot of objects. This may never come up. And frankly, you can still create great images even of these objects without ever doing it. This used to be a process that was a bit guesstimation, where you would try to estimate the amount of signal that you had, and there wasn't like an empirical way to do it. But Charles Hagen has created this photometric continuum subtraction script that actually uses the stars in the image and analyzes it. We know the spectrum of those, and you tell it what the bandwidth of your filters are and things like that, and it does a much better job of estimating what part of your H alpha image is, let's say, coming from the red background versus coming from H alpha. These are all estimates. The only way my understanding is the only way to actually properly do this is to get those very rare filters. They make these continuum subtraction filters. So let's say you have 5 nanometer bandwidth narrowband filters. They'll make a 5 nanometer filter, but it's shifted away from the H alpha or S2 line or the O3 line. where it's deliberately avoiding that. And then that allows, then you can, that's the proper way to do it. That's a lot of work for a very small subset of objects. I don't think a lot of people do that. That would technically be the proper way to do it. This way is a pretty good estimate, though, where you just use a regular red filter and it will go estimate that. So I'm gonna warn you, though, the image I'm about to show you, so we're gonna use M78. I think this is one of the best, hands down, best objects in the night sky. It's got so much going on. And part of that is because exactly what I mentioned before. You've got a broadband reflection nebula with dust lanes and everything that's been overlaid with a bunch of H-alpha emission. And that creates this color contrast, and you've got a lot of interesting structure. And I had an existing really nice image of this area. So I had a 13.5-hour RGB image. I fully processed it. I put it in the astrophotographer's universe. I was like, I'm totally happy with that. And then I went back and I thought, okay, well, I've got some time. Let me take some H-alpha data. And I set that data aside, and I meant to just do the continuum subtraction process with it. And Stephen emailed me yesterday and said, hey, people are interested in learning about continuum subtraction. I was like, well, okay, well, I better actually go process that data. So the good news is I did the processing of the data. The bad news is this was just a first pass. This was just a very quick, just to demonstrate what it looks like and what you might be able to get out of it, and maybe where it might be disappointing even. So I'm going to show this to you. I'm going to say the final image is not what I would consider a final image at all. This is just a rough, quick process just to show how the process works. So we're going to start out with the red image. So here's the red linear red image on the left and the H-alpha image on the right. And so you can see where the red image on the left, you can see the how strong the reflection nebula is. And on the right, you see the H-alpha. So you start to see what the component is. And I have a sneaking suspicion that this very bright reflection nebula here, which is white, actually in reality, right? It's very, very close to white, maybe even blue. But white is composed of red, green, and blue. And so some of that red, some of that white light is hitting at the H-alpha wavelength, even though it's not coming from ionized hydrogen. And so I think you're seeing that over here. This is not actually, this is what the H-alpha filter shows, but that doesn't mean that all the light here is coming from ionized hydrogen. It's just all the light that happens to be at that wavelength. And a small portion of it where you have something very bright like this is getting through. That will come back to haunt us a little bit later, as we'll see. But this is kind of the point of continuum subtraction. This is why you would do it, is I've got an H-alpha image, and I know it's kind of contaminated with something else that I want to separate. So I'm going to run photometric continuum subtraction. You tell it your narrowband image, and you tell it your broadband image. Sorry, it doesn't show here, but I did select it. And then you can have it try to generate a starless image, or you can deal with that yourself, which is what I'm going to do because I haven't had great luck with it always being able to remove the stars. So in the middle is what we get after running the photometric continuum subtraction. So you can see the stars. Actually, let me go back a slide so you can see. So on the right-hand side, this is the original H-alpha. And now you can see this is what it looks like when we've tried to estimate what we think just the actual contribution from H-alpha is. That's what this script is trying to do. The stars almost go away, but you often get this effect here, and I've zoomed in just so you can see it, where it's subtracted out the stars, but the star core still appears. This is easy.
This is exactly what I have seen.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why I wanted to have you address it, because I look at that and I say, oh my God, this is ugly.
Yes.
Can this
terrible.
be salvaged? So
yes, you're exactly right. So actually I ran it. The first time I ran this with Generate Starless, and it actually did not do a great job. It looked worse, actually. And it does that sometimes. It's okay. But I knew that if I ran StarNet on this image, it would take care of all these, and it did. So I took this image and I just ran through StarNet, and it just plucked out all those stars. Now the black holes in the image remain, but those aren't problematic necessarily. The way we're going to add this information back, the black holes actually aren't going to be, in most of the ways you would add that data back, aren't really harmful, but the little star cores can be. So yes, so the short answer is if you see that, you can use something like StarNet or Star Exterminator. It'll just clean that right up. Okay, here's the image after I ran StarNet on it, and you can see there's no more dots inside those little holes. So I'm going to use a standard screen transfer function stretch. I'm going to use the full stretch because I want this to look pretty strong. And this is what we get after that. And then I run noise exterminator. I'm going to run a pretty aggressive noise reduction on this. So it's starting to look a little better. And then but it looks a little flat. So I'm going to do what we did before, right? So I've got a starless noise reduced image. So that means in most of the time I can move that black point up and I can move that white point inward and take that little bit of dynamic range that we have and stretch it across the whole dynamic range of the image. Now it does clip a little bit, but I'm not worried about that. I can even see that these 175,000 stars, these are these black holes, right? I'm not actually worried about clipping those. That doesn't bother me. I'm not really clipping much. So I'm just working off the histogram here. When I move the black point, I move the white point in. You can see I'm still not clipping anything, which is still fine. So then I'm gonna I want to be able to see the structure in the H alpha signal. And so I'm gonna do a little bit of contrast enhancement. And now you can start to see those streaks in the H alpha. And this is what I want. This is what I want to add to the final image. Now, you can see these Herbig-Haro objects really starting to stand out. And the crazy thing is actually they stand out even in the red channel. These actually emit mostly in sulfur, is my understanding. The S2 channel, they still show up very brightly here in H alpha. I will also note I still don't think that this is real. This is just the brightest part of the reflection nebula where it's white. I don't think there's actually an H alpha component here. That it might be, but I have my doubts. I think this is still an artifact, and I think this is just like I said, these are estimates. You can't actually subtract out perfectly and separate photons that came from ionized hydrogen versus came from reflection nebula. You can only make an estimate. So this is one thing. If I were to go back and reprocess this image at this stage, I didn't do it here because I was literally doing this right before this presentation, but I would probably go in and clone stamp this out. I think this is not actually reflective of reality. Okay, now let's go. Now that we've got our H alpha image and we've got it, it's now nonlinear, it's been stretched, it's been processed, it's kind of ready to go. We're going to go over it. This is what the raw RGB data look like. So you can see right away, I got the screen transfer function applied. You can see it's kind of green, but it looks great for this stage. I look at this and I go, wow, we got color contrast right away. The blues are apparent. The red is apparent. It's got good details. You can see these Herbig-Haro objects down in here. Like this image actually looks really good for a raw straight out of color combination. So the first thing I'm going to do, we're going to plate solve the image, and then we're going to run the photometric color calibration. And you can see immediately that green cast is almost completely gone. The blues look bluer. The reds look redder. I'm not stretching it. I haven't applied any color saturation to it. It looks immediately much more natural colors. This is the benefit of color calibration. Now we're going to run noise exterminator. Again, I'm going to back off the default value a little bit. And I ended up running it at 0.77. And then I'm going to run StarNet and remove the stars. So I've placed the stars over in another image. And this is what we get. And now I'm like, okay, this is looking really nice. Here's the histogram. This is another example where I was able to move the black point over. And actually, sorry, I took the screenshot after I'd done it, but I just wanted to show you where I ended up putting the black point to get this histogram. I was able to move the black point over, but again, this is pretty bright. This is similar to what we were with M51 earlier, where I wasn't able to really materially move the white point over because part of the nebula is actually at 0.99 brightness levels, right? So we don't have a lot of room to sort of do anything at the upper end of the brightness levels before we start clipping. But this is a good start. This makes me realize there's still some work to do as far as contrast. So immediately, and this is a huge improvement right away, just a basic contrast enhancement curve with curves. Now we're talking. Now this is starting to look much more like what you expect an image of M78 to look like. While we've got curves open, we can boost the color saturation as well. And again, now the blues are starting to look really nice. The reds are looking really nice. A little bit of green here still. That's never good. You don't want to have green floating around. So we'll take care of that a little bit later, though. There are a lot of different ways I could have added the H alpha into this. And now we've got a processed starless RGB image, a processed starless H alpha continuum subtracted image. We need to bring the two together. And I will say it is generally the best practice to do it with starless data. It's just complicating things a lot if you have stars in there. I decided just for fun, I actually haven't used this new MB RGB, a relatively new script. So I decided to use it. Probably my normal practice might be to use pixel math and apply the H alpha image both to the red and then a little bit over to the blue channel to get that electric red. But that's kind of what this process does. So I decided I'm gonna give it a try just for this. I'm gonna use this script to add it in. You actually give it your filter bandwidth, and you give it the two different images you want to combine. So you can see how that's going to look. And then you added the stars back in, and I used the the same formula you saw before, the dynamic star recombination. So immediately you notice, wow, like the H alpha is bright here. This is almost overpowering. But look, the Herbig-Haro objects really pop out. We've got a green color cast. We're going to have to take care of that. And worst of all, I've got this clipped, blown out area here. And again, this is what I was saying earlier, that was probably not real H alpha. And then when you added it back into what was already close to white, it really actually should be more of a blue reflection nebula. It ended up causing some weird effects and some clipping. So again, this is not a final image. This is just me demonstrating the process tonight. But I think it gives you a sense of what the effect of continuum subtraction can be. And for comparison, I told you before that I had just the RGB. Before I'd even shot any H alpha data, I had an RGB image that I had fully processed. So we actually have the chance sort of to compare those two things. So this was my original image. So to my earlier point, when you're asking yourself if you want to go through the trouble of continuum subtraction, which is, as you saw, it's a few extra steps, but also like you get to the end of it and you're like, oh, that's not quite right. I got to back up. And you're probably gonna have to go through that a couple of times to dial things in where you want them. And you say, is that really worth it? This is with no H alpha data at all. Like the red filter is going to pick up the H alpha quite prominently. And so this was my original image. So based on this, I'll probably still play around with the continuum subtraction, but let me go back to the continuum subtraction data. I can get a lot more H alpha signal in here, but like these Herbig-Haro objects, if I go to the RGB, I think they actually look a lot more natural when you're not overpowering the H alpha there. I think this H alpha here looks good. It could probably be boosted a little bit. So in the end, I may blend the two images or something like that. But the point I wanted to make here is that don't feel like you have to do continuum subtraction. It is for a limited number of objects and situations where you have prominent narrowband and broadband data that overlap and you want to process them separately. And you have to ask yourself, would your time be better spent just taking more RGB data and revealing that red through the red channel anyway? So thank you for having me. It was great. I'm glad we got the chance to get through all 4 of those processing takes. Again, there's no right way or single way to process. This was just how I would process them, at least how I would process them. The time that I processed them, like I said, I might even make slightly different choices if I had to do them differently. But again, there's my contact information, and happy to take any questions, and we can go back and have a look at any details you want to go into.
Sure.
So, Charles, can I ask? Sorry.
Go ahead, Chris.
Well, I was going to ask about the stretch. you're not using a generalized hyperbolic stretch tool.
Yeah.
And I wondered why you're not using that.
Great question. And I knew this question would come up. A couple of things. Great if people want to use GHS. It's a really interesting tool. I'm not 100% convinced it can do anything that you can't do with histogram transformation and curves. Like it's a good discipline to know where to set your black points and your white points. And I haven't I've been playing around with it. I haven't been able to achieve anything that I can't achieve with the existing stretching tools that I've got. But I see a lot of people have made it a core part of their processing toolkit. So it just hasn't wowed me. I haven't seen like a reason to adopt it yet. But maybe if there's something, I don't know, is there something you've been using it for that you're like, wow, this has made my life a lot easier?
Yeah, I like it. And I do what you do. I do a small stretch to start with. Don't stretch it all the way. And once I've done that in histogram transformation, then I switch to the generalized hyperbolic stretch. And I'm very careful. Yeah, I'll stretch it one way, then I'll stretch it the other way. From the dark side, and then with the symmetry point on the bright side. And I'll keep doing that until I've sort of really concentrated on it's really the midtones that get most of the stretch. I don't want stars to be stretched too much, and I don't want to stretch the dark. I just want the midtones. And so that allows you, I like it. It allows you to do that. But I guess, you're right. You can do the same thing in curves.
Yeah. And I found my fear is that, and not saying this is necessarily an output of that tool, but in general, the further you stray from just a standard gamma stretch, the less natural your image starts to look, right? And you can, like, you play around with curves. Like, you know that when you create a funny looking curve, the image starts to look all artificial very quickly. And so, in general, like, the two kinds of curves I want to apply are just a gamma stretch, like that logarithmic curve, and then like that S-shaped curve for contrast. I think GHS allows you to sort of create a combination of those, maybe in one tool. It's like histogram and curves in one tool. My fear is that a lot of people overdo it and end up the net output curve is this weird shaped curve, and it could lead to an artificial looking image.
Yeah. Well, the two things in my workflow that lead to an artificial image are too much local histogram equalization, i.e. contrast. That's the biggest one that will screw up your image. And then I use multiscale linear transform quite a lot as a sharpening tool.
Yes. Yeah, for really, really fine details, like down at like the 2 to 4 to 6 pixel level, like, yeah, that's a great tool.
Yeah, I love that. I love that tool. But again, it's very easy to overdo it.
Yeah, it'll start enhancing noise at some very, very quickly. And the defaults for that tool are frustratingly set way too high. Like the default values are automatically higher than you'd want to use it.
I never use the defaults. I'm always start at the low end, and then maybe I'll just edge up a little bit. Don't overdo it. What about putting the stars back in? Do you ever use image blend or script?
I haven't. I actually haven't played with it. I've seen people on YouTube using it and stuff like that. But I guess it gives you the ability to sort of preview a little bit how your stars are going to go back in. Because otherwise, I find like Pixel Math does a great job. But I think that way. So
yeah, it gives you a preview, and you've got sliders for the black point, and the other extreme, the white point, and then your midtones on both the starless and the stars. So you can play with it and get it where you want it.
Interesting. Yeah, I haven't played with that. I like the idea though of the dynamic recombination that I was showing you. I like the idea of it not applying the same stretch to all the stars, but doing it contextually based on where that star is being placed in the image, if possible. So that's what I was trying to achieve there that I'm not sure a lot of other tools could do.
Yeah.
One of the things that I really learned today was on your first image on the creation of the mask for the stars and how you iteratively created masks
Mhm.
to protect them, protect the core, protect the color, and then bring them out. So that was definitely a new technique, or at least a new to me technique
Yeah.
that I think was incredibly helpful. The one thing I do like about the generalized hyperbolic stretch, in addition to the features that Chris was mentioning, is the protect highlights slider,
Hmm.
which if you pull it up, actually, if you let me screen share, I'll show you what I'm talking about. Well, actually, I can't. No, never mind. I've got two computers going at the same time, and I forgot. That's not the computer I'm looking at
On the
over
other
here
one, yeah.
is not it. But if you pull up the generalized hyperbolic stretch um, process, so you typically will use these little sliders to to stretch the image. What I like the most is the protected highlights slider at the bottom, so that if I do have a bright core in there, as I'm
Hmm.
stretching, I will take that bottom slider and take it over to the left significantly to make sure I'm not blasting out the core, and I
Right.
can still bring out the finer elements. So that's
It's giving you
why
some masking automatically, it sounds like. Yeah.
I think that's probably correct. I'm not exactly sure how it works, but that's the thing I like about it. But I also feel like sometimes some of these processes are just a different version. These different stretches are just a different version of the traditional histogram stretch that we all learned early
Hmm.
on, right?
I think, yeah, a lot of times you think of it, they're kind of combining a lot of tools, right? So it sounds like with GHS, you can get like there's a curves, there's a histogram transformation because you're putting multiple points in it. Then
Right.
there's a little bit of masking, there's a little bit of color saturation adjustments, and I think maybe I've become facile with using those tools separately, and so I like to see each one discreetly and better understand how each one's being applied. But combining them all into one place is actually pretty handy to have as long as you don't overdo it.
Exactly. And so there are good things and bad things, I think, if about using these more sophisticated tools. I think for people who are starting out, what you have taught is that's how I was taught, except for that one part with the first image with the iterative stretching of the stars using the masks.
Hmm.
That's pretty much, I mean, if you read your books, it's pretty consistent with what you teach there.
Yeah.
Right.
So
That way you
that's
understand the concept. I would say for anybody who's a beginner, it's probably best to get good at using something like histogram transformation and curve transformation before going to something like GHS, because I think you need to it's you're changing one variable and you're seeing the outcome of it and kind of understanding that before you start messing with other variables and sort of creating these complicated shaped curves. I think it gives you a good intuition to sort of start with the basic tools before you move up to the more comprehensive ones.
right. And I'm very glad that you brought up use of the um, I always forget the name of it. It's uh, not local histogram equalization, but the other one.
The
L
dynamic range
Yeah,
tool.
yeah. What was
Oh,
a
the H,
multi-scale linear transform?
Multi-scale.
Or
HDMR or
yeah,
HDR
HDMR.
scale. Yes, yes.
Yeah, HDMR. Now on HDMR, okay, so here's my question. Now that I've remembered the name of it, um, I don't know where they get these names, but I'm sure it comes from someplace logical. But
It's yeah, there's a high it's high dynamic range. It's meant to mimic the look of a high dynamic range image where you've taken a long exposure and a short exposure and trying to compress them together. It mimics that look basically.
Right. So something that I've experimented with frequently, and it's sort of like I do it, then I undo it, do it, then I undo it, is the two intensity and lightness
Mm-hmm.
scaling functions, or it's under the scaling function menu. So you can click on the two intensity, or you can click on two lightness, one or the other. And then you can click on lightness mask. So you can have a
Yes.
combination of two intensity plus lightness mask, or two lightness plus lightness mask, or you can just do lightness mask, or you can do nothing. And so a lot of different combinations there, but I played with it and I'll try this one. Do I like it? Nah, not sure I do. Try this one. Do I like it? Nah, not sure I do. And then the number of layers. So I noticed that you do not use or didn't mention using the two intensity, two lightness, or lightness
Yeah.
mask
Yeah.
features.
Yes.
Any particular reason, or is it just because you find that it doesn't add value to what it is you're trying to accomplish?
Um, so the two yeah, I didn't find the need to apply it to separately to lightness or intensity. So intensity is actually I think that should more accurately read saturation is my understanding of the way using the tool that would be. So
Okay.
that's because I'm actually mousing over it now and it says to the I component of HSI. So that's hue, saturation, intensity. So I guess it's not saturation, but uh I, like it doesn't seem to mess it up to use those, but it doesn't seem to help either lightness or intensity. Um, the masking is probably if you weren't already using a mask like I was. I find though that when I use the lightness mask, it, it's less predictable. Um, I, and it can be even worse at that effect of over flattening the image, right? So that's why I didn't do it. I wanted to apply it globally to the galaxy, not to the background. So I'd already masked out the background. I was just showing the galaxy. But in my experience, when I tell it to apply an additional mask, it's gonna do more of it to the brightest parts and less to the other parts, and it tends to look even flatter. And it's just to me, it always feels a little less natural. So I just apply it, but then I back the whole thing off. So I just don't apply the whole thing strongly. I apply the whole thing. I think I chose 0.4 for the amount in this case, because I did want to reveal those, and my goal there was to reveal some of those dark lanes in the middle. So again, these are all kind of personal choices. I think the lightness mask is probably the more useful of those tools. I've never actually gotten anything out of intensity or two lightness as those checkboxes. But
Okay.
maybe other people have found other useful things to do. Yeah, they don't strike me as particularly useful. And actually thinking about it, yeah, no, I'll leave it. They make me want to go play around with it a little bit.
All right. And then the other tool that I'm really glad you brought up is the local histogram equalization, or LHE tool,
Mhm.
which I think you were using that as an example to sharpen without overdoing it,
Yeah,
and with
that's
the
a blunt
emphasis.
instrument, that tool. It's
It really is. So I traditionally only use point 0.1,
yeah,
but then I'll increase the kernel radius and the contrast. But you can do exactly what you did also, which is to make the amount, 0.3 or point 0.4, but then you reduce the kernel radius
yeah.
um,
And
to,
it and you what I do actually when choosing that is I first set the amount all the way to 1. And then I play around with the kernel because if you slide it to like kernel of 400 or something, that is, I believe, almost the same as just applying a S-shaped curve to the whole image. Like when you set the
Hmm.
kernel as big as the image, you've just applied a contrast curve to the whole image. You're not really targeting any particular scale. So I then move that slider back and I zoom in, like you can crop the real-time preview and I say, I know what I'm trying to target in this case is something, down in this small scale, and I will play around. And I've got the amount set to 100, but that's allowing me to see what scale of features are being targeted. Once I've dialed in the kernel, then I take the amount and go, okay, now I've figured out like what the correct kernel is. Now I'm going to bring that down to, like you said, 0.3, 0.4 tops.
Got it. Okay. I thought I saw a question. Oh, I'm sorry. Never mind. Cy Simonson was commenting about my Casablanca poster in the background. Never mind. I was wondering, oh, we have a question from the audience. Oh, no, never mind. Thank you, Cy. Yes, it's my favorite movie also. But in any event, I really appreciate what you've done for us in showing us sort of your secret sauce or the process that you follow in creating your images. And I'm really looking forward to that fourth edition. I say that I just downloaded the third edition. I had the first one. I'm going to look at the third edition, but I'm also looking forward to the fourth edition. I want to let everybody know that if you go to Charles's web page, right, you can buy the PDF for about $15 less than the hard copy edition. Is that right?
Yes, and you're getting something more than the third edition, but not the fourth. So as
Okay.
I finish chapters of the fourth edition, I'm adding them into the PDF. So the PDF version is sort of like my current latest draft of the fourth edition. So it's chapters 1 through 5 or 6 right now are what you would see in the fourth edition, and then the later chapters are still from the third edition. So I'm kind of working my way through it. So if you get the PDF version, you're getting sort of whatever the latest thinking is in the book at that time.
Okay, very good. Let me see. And looks like Chris has dropped into the message. The
I
messages
was just
there.
putting the link there for people. I put it in there
Right.
twice by mistake.
Thank you.
I've got a question for you. So when you're doing narrowband, or when I do narrowband, I'll always take the time to do RGB, just maybe half an hour of each just for the stars.
hmm
Would you also do that?
You
Or
know, I don't typically anymore. So for HOO images, so hydrogen is red and oxygen is applied to green and blue, the stars are actually pretty darn close. They're a little green, you got to use SCNR to dial that back, but they're actually pretty close to the normal star colors. For SHO, obviously the stars get they get a little wacky with the couple palette, but again, you can correct that, especially now that we can separate stars out of the image. You can correct that. SHO stars in my images tend to look a lot closer to mostly white. There's less color variation, but I don't know. And I know a lot of people take separate. I did it for a while, and I was just like, I don't think anybody was noticing it in my images. Maybe they were, and I wasn't. But it seemed like a lot of extra work, process and do the alignments and everything, take all the extra data, and I don't know how much it was actually adding to the final product. So I kind of leave it alone. As long as the stars aren't magenta or green, and they tend to follow along that Planck curve of sort of blue to white to orange, and you don't have any off colors in there, I don't think most people notice that much. So it may be easier just to correct the star colors than to take separate ones, but to each their own. It's definitely not accurate it's not accurate star colors necessarily when they're SHO, but I tend to just kind of leave them alone. That's just laziness, though, I think.
even what do you do when you do narrowband for the stars? Do you just use the narrowband to create star images, or do you take RGB or?
No, I just use the narrowband data. Yeah, like so like I said, for HOO, they're fine. Like those stars, other than you dial back the green a little bit, those star colors are actually pretty accurate, just for the way the HOO palette works. SHO, my typical process is I pull the stars out, I invert the image, that allows you to see. So then the magenta halo, which you typically is what you typically get with an SHO Hubble palette. That magenta turns to green. I run SCNR on the green, invert the image back, and now the stars are they have less color, but they don't have any objectionable greens or magentas in them anymore, and I just add them back in that way. So I don't take separate data at all for stars.
All right.
All right. Any other questions? Well, thank you so much, Charles. I hope you'll come back to our group maybe in a year or so. Maybe by then, the fourth edition will be completed. Hopefully, you won't take quite as long as the author of Game of Thrones to come out with the next edition. We're still waiting, right? But
any day now, he says, right?
yeah, if you look at it as not a blog, every day, I think we're getting closer, just like some sort of major other event. Anyway, but thank you so much. I hope you'll come back in a year or so. Maybe by then the fourth edition will be pert near done, and we can see what additional information you can share with us at that time. It's been so wonderful having you. Thank you so much
Thank you.
for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys. Thanks. It was great to speak with you. Guys, take care.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Charles. All right. Okay, the next item that we have on the agenda for today is I'm very excited that Bob Circus is going to talk about where we are with the Noble Observatory at Rising Star and how close are we to having members using it for the purpose of imaging, et cetera, et cetera. Bob, go for it. If you're still on.
There we go.
There we go.
Thanks. So where are we with the Noble? In the rain. Anyway, that was meant to be a joke. So
I get it.
I think we're all in the rain. It's just been excruciating. So we're on two tracks. Physical completion, there are just a few things left to do. I'm pretty sure we're gonna the puzzle mat we've talked about. I think someone's gonna donate a puzzle mat that's gonna say FWAS on the top and Noble on the bottom. Just someone's willing to do that, and mechanically it's working. When we switched out the 2600 for the 183, I took the wrong damn camera out there. It's a 183 mono. So as soon as the weather gets to a point where it's worthwhile for me to drive out there, I'll switch out that. We plan to make it available for people to sign up and do thing or schedule time around June 20th. In the way that's hopefully going to work, we have a Google form that's available and works now. I'm going to walk through the new website, but we hope to that we can do that using the website, so people can get used to logging in and get registered, get look and feel, and at which point, when you say schedule my event, an email will get generated to 3 people, and one of the 3 people will get your image session scheduled. And then shortly after that, the whole automation piece will be completed. So any questions on that part? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and try and share my screen. Somewhere down here is the share button. You can request sharing. I'm sending a request. I don't know where it's going. Did someone get my request to allow me to share?
Yes, I'm sorry, I was
Awesome.
muted. You should have it.
Thank you. Okay, so let me First of all, can you all see my screen?
I can, but it's very small. At least for me, it is. Maybe I don't know if there's a way to make it larger or not. It's just kind of small for me to read anything. Okay, that's an improvement. Thank you.
Okay, so as you recall, I did have a website working. I didn't like the way it worked. It was really basically a proof of concept. So I'm going to walk through what we have now in what you can see and expect going forward. Eventually, the website's going to be hosted on Azure. Azure is going to give us a free hosted environment, and that will be pretty cool. So if you go to just the basic homepage, and these are things that can and will change going forward. I just needed to have a landing page here, but this is kind of the look and feel of what the website's gonna look like. So we'll have an entry page, donation page. You can sign in, sky conditions. This is telling you whether or not we can actually do any imaging, which we can't. So if we look at our sky conditions, we click here. I'm going to change this color. So immediately it's telling us it's marginal. Conditions are acceptable. But the first thing you're going to see right here is that clouds are going to start rolling in at 9 o'clock. So this bar will become red and it will say not available. This data here is directly from our weather station. So was collected at 2046, and we get our temperature, whether it's overcast or not, dew point, all this important stuff, which it is. And here's what our sky temperature delta just tells us whether or not it's cloudy. The bigger the negative number, I should say technically the smaller the negative number, the less cloudy it is, because the weather station gets the temperature of the air, and when clouds are around, it's warmer. We have a cloud forecast. This is telling us clouds are expected, and this is going out to Meteo website. That's telling us, hey, clouds are going to come in. It's probably going to rain, and this is what it's going to look like over the next 12 hours. Astronomical conditions forecast. This is from another website called 7timer, and it calculates what the seeing and transparency is going to be. Probably not collecting the data properly at the moment. And you'll see here we collect weather information from two different weather stations. And the reason for that is our weather station is awesome, but it can't predict, it can't tell us if it's snowing, if it's sleeting, freezing rain, or hail. So we look at these two weather stations to see what the precipitation is, and the weather station in Abilene can tell us what type of precipitation we're having, whether it's rain, whether it's sleet, whether it's freezing rain and whatnot. We use this in the algorithm to determine whether or not we should image. Now, there is some distance away, and we do give it some weight. And for example, if it's cloudy and rising star, here's Abilene over here, here's rising star. if it's cloudy and rising star and there's any kind of precipitation, we're going to close the dome. And again, I should say if the precipitation is hail, sleet, or freezing rain or snow, because our weather station can't tell us that, and we just don't want to have moisture inside the observatory. Then we have Astrospheric here, and then we have the Jim McCatherine specials. I love these things. These things are cool. You know, these are thunder and the same thing. There are two different types of radar cross sections. And then our moon and solar. I'm hoping to be able to make this thing public so you guys can have a look at it. I'm real interested in where things should belong. I'm thinking about making it so you can slide these things around and set it up for your own individual profile. But this gives you just a quick look at what's going on weather-wise. Any questions on this?
What's the fail safe if we lose power? And I think you've explained this before. I think you said if we lose power, the UPS device will just cause it to close automatically.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, if we lose power or internet,
Okay.
yeah, we'll signal. There's plenty of juice in there to run, but my feeling is that if we don't have power, it's just not safe. And the UPS system is moderately intelligent, but we don't have any real way of determining. We know when the power turns off and when it turns back on, but we don't know when the battery's draining. So we just make a conscious decision that it's unsafe and the dome closes. Okay. Any questions? And you can, do your standard stuff. You can make it smaller or bigger. Okay. Right. So I'm going to come down here, and if I click on member analysis, it's going to bring me to a log on screen. So we can log in. You can register an account, and the way that works is when you register, you need to know your Night Sky Network logon ID and your Night Sky Network primary email address. That's how we verify whether or not you exist or a member. And when you do that, you'll be queried on building your credentials. Right now, you can log on with the user ID and password, or you can use Google. Well, sometimes it's still a little flaky. If it doesn't work, I'll just log on with my user ID. And I have to figure that part of it out. So I'm going to go back and I'll just log on. Ay, ay, ay. Okay. So this is the dashboard. It's going to show you information like this. Should be a bar that says whether or not imaging is available. A lot of stuff isn't built here. So this gives you a list of your requests that you may have done this week. You get 8 hours if you're scheduled. In any data here that you've collected already. you can, up here, this chip tells you what the weather status is. This you can change, if you want to be bright in the night. What I found out with some folks last night, this is preferred. So when you log in, you'll most members will see this navigation bar. If you're the treasurer or administrator, you'll be able to see these two items here. And then you have the donate and sign out bar. So we're in the dashboard. I can do plan my night, and also it's not showing yet because we haven't gone anywhere. So I'm just going to go into my targets. So here, up here on the right, it shows you, I went from the dashboard. Oh, that's to my target list. I meant to say, let me go back to the dashboard. I meant to say target search. So I'm in the dashboard and now I'm in target search. And these are all, right now, the only things that are loaded are the Messier catalog. You'll be able to, pretty extensive search. This should be DEC. And the way the search for RA and DEC is going to work, you put in RA and DEC in there, and it will bring back all the objects within a half a degree or a degree of RA and DEC. Okay, that's one search criteria. Here, I can say I'm interested in Andromeda only, and I get all my Andromeda, and I can also M31. I'm only interested in that, or I can just clear my search and bring all that back. So this is pretty straightforward. You have page sizes you can choose from 15, 25. 25 is default, 50 and 100. And then this score here is based on how much time is available to image, how high the target is in the sky, and distance from the moon. Now, these are faux numbers here. They're not really, so they don't reflect, but it gives you a score. So you also get, catalog name, what I call the common name, and then the primary principal object type. So I might say I'm interested in open clusters. And it'll bring me back the list of open clusters. Okay. Any comments or thoughts on this? Okay. So the next step I want to do is, let's say I'm interested in the wild duck cloud. I'm just going to pick something here. So I'm putting that in my list. And then if I click on it, I get a detailed information about it. And since it's in my list, I could actually frame it. But if I want the full detail, I'll get a full page. And note over here, dashboard, target search, and I'm looking at wild duck cluster. So this is giving us our imaging time window, which is above 30 degrees, peak altitude, and the moon separation, and the percentage of moon. And then we have a swinging, a moving window, 15-day window. So this is saying that on Tuesday, excuse me. So today is available for scheduling 2.5 hours above 30 degrees for this particular object. And the booking is closed That I don't believe is, oh, it's closed because today is the 2nd. So here it's saying I could schedule something here for this object if I wanted. And by just clicking here, we'll do that in just a moment. So if I want to see what the object looks like, so that's the object, and this is the field of view of the Raza with the 183. So, excuse me. So if I wanted to actually frame it, I could frame it here if I wanted, but you won't be able to save it. So if you go back to target search, and we'll do Hercules cluster because I've saved it already. And I want to frame it. Open the framing tool. And from here, I can frame it real time. Let's just say, for example, I want that yellow star to be the center. Don't know why, but just showing you an example. And as you frame, you'll notice that the RA and deck is changing. Here I took it out of the field of view. So if you put the pink star right on where you want, okay, if you do that, or if you say, man, I've really messed up, so I'm just going to reset it and I'll put it back in the middle. Then you can give it a name. This is going to change a little bit. I've already figured out that we need to do some things here. Save the frame. And so that's done. Hit escape. And so I can go look at my target list. And these are the things I have on my target. And you can see that I've got some notes here. What I need to do is allow you to create your own names. So, any questions so far? It's very scary. Okay, so from here, I want to go to plan my night. So here's where you would plan your evening, your events. This still has to be flushed out. And excuse me. So I don't think this is working yet. In fact, I'm sure it's not. It's not. One moment. Hey, I'm on the phone. Bye. Okay, so anyway, from here you'll be able to say, I want to do this image, M13, M11, M whatever. I want to do them M13 from 8 to 10, M11 from 10 to 1, and the Bob special from 1 to 3. And I want to do 30-second exposures, and when you click submit, it'll send an email out. We'll get it scheduled. So that's basically what we call minimum viable product. Any questions or thoughts?
It's looking great, Bob.
Oh, okay. I'm going to, I don't know if it'll be this week or next week. I'll send instructions on how you can actually get logged in and kind of look around. The other thing, because I'm the fundraiser guy, I created this little button, and you can do a donation in 2 clicks. So you can pick a fund you might want to donate to, how much you want to donate. You can say one time monthly, quarterly, and annual. You just pop in your name. And put a little message in there and click donate. Now, if you use this one, which is Stripe, you'll be able to use Google Pay or Apple Pay if you're so inclined. You'll be able to use PayPal, but that's why we use Stripe here. And so if you want to get on a mailing list, you can do that. And you just click, and then this simulates a payment, and then you get a little thing followed up by an email. So anyway, I think that's all I had for this evening. And I should say that your whether you're light or dark or whatever skin you're using is saved in your profile, so it's saved across sessions. And the same thing with how you have your port, how if this is all folded up, and if I log off and I sign back in, you'll see that it's all open. And if I do this, sign out, and then sign back in. So the objective is that we're going to keep track of where you are. So you may be in the middle of something and leave or get signed out. When you come back in, we're going to take you back to where you were. And the same thing with the light or dark. So I'll sign back. Well,
So Bob, will there be a system, like sort of a tracing or monitoring whereby, if somebody's on there and let's say they have some kind of, I don't want to say catastrophic fault, but something they're doing and it just goes very wrong for them and
you'll
they
get a
don't know.
you'll get a pushover notification.
But my question is, though, for others to help them, right? So I get a pushover notification if something goes wrong at one of my remote scopes, and then
Yeah.
I'll go try and figure it out. But for others who may not be as familiar with Nina, they might need some assistance in trying to figure out where they've gone wrong. Sometimes, instead of saying, okay, send me the Nina log, right, where you can analyze a big file and try to figure out exactly what happened, which is what they do on the Nina Discord, right? So if you have something that goes wrong, you can send them your log and then somebody will analyze it and tell you what you should have done or what you can do to improve. Absent people in our group going through the Nina log or going to the Discord and uploading the Nina log, is there anything that we're going to have to monitor what they're doing so that we can say, we see it now, here's where you made your mistake?
Well, first off, users will not be doing anything with Nina. They won't have access to it. We are using Target Scheduler, so when we go live with the full feature, when you say schedule, all it's going to do is inject the artifacts into the target, into the database that's used by Target Scheduler. So we have a predefined sequence, and that's that. So we'll have systematic processes that take what you enter and get it into the schedule. Now, you will be able to, if you are a member, you'll be able to look at any imaging session in real time. You'll get the you'll get a structured Nina, the Nina image screen, which it will be minimal. It'll have guiding over here on the right. It'll have the rendered fits file in the middle. uh, I'm sorry, focusing results on the right, guiding on the bottom, and typical stuff, but you'll be able to see what's going on. We'll also be capturing the log, and if there's an error, um, uh, you'll be able to see the errors. We're gonna separate the wheat from the chaff if and when there's an error. And then the other thing we plan to do is on our Discord server have a Noble Observatory channel where we can feed information real time. So you don't necessarily have to log into the website. You can go to the Discord channel pipeline to see what's going on also.
Okay, so I guess it's helpful to know this because I think the last time we had an update from you, we didn't, at least I didn't have a clear picture in my mind on how you were going to structure this, and it sounds like you've got a very sophisticated structure here, which almost, in my language, you've got a structure which is sitting on top of Nina so that you've got a better graphics interface and you can say, okay, here's what I want to do. I want to get
Yeah,
Casper the Friendly Ghost and I'm going to center it here. And now I don't have to do all of these things that are, Nina specific,
exactly.
and it does it for you. Well, this
Yeah,
is great news. And I'm glad that I asked a stupid question regarding, gee,
yeah,
what's going to happen with Nina? But we're not, we are using Nina, but what you built is a structure on top of Nina
yes,
to make it more useful.
right. And so what that means going forward, um, sometime in the future, we decide that Nina is not for us. So the way it's built is we, we could take out Nina and use Chris Ashford special or key stars or whatever. Because there's so many of them.
Right.
So that it's just a layer of abstraction. We can't of course use ASI air um, because it's a very closed system. If you think of this as C star writ large, if you think about how you do C star, you say, I want to do this, 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 this. And I don't know if it asks you about exposure times and binning and all that kind of stuff. We're going to take all of that decision making. You won't have to worry about that. You may say you want to do 90 seconds, but our experience says you're not going to, you want to do 90 seconds, but on a RASA, f1.9, that's not going to work for this object. So um, we're going to help guide you in that.
Okay. All right. Anybody else have any questions for Bob on Noble Observatory, or Bob, any other comments?
No, no.
Okay. Well, fantastic job. I'm really thrilled that we're going to have this different interface that will hopefully make it a lot easier to operate for the average person. And I think that's what we really need. So really thrilled to see the progress here.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me think. The other thing I wanted to tell the group about was when I went to NEAF 2 months ago, was it now, I think, almost. I got to meet with a number of different vendors and talk to them and establish some good relationships. There is a man named John Kasianowicz who operates a system near Fort Davis in West Texas. And I haven't put up my interview of him yet on my YouTube channel, but that's coming. But I want everybody to know about him because, and in the APSIG group specifically, because what he does is he's got his plane wave, he's got his all of his equipment there. And for a small fee, you can image using his equipment. And that's, I think it's the plane wave CDK like 21. I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly which one it is, but it's the one of the very large plane waves, which has the amazingly long focal length. And he's got a huge 10 micron mount. And so for what sounded like a very reasonable amount of money, I mean, not much at all, you can use that equipment for a couple of nights and get some data on something if you want to. And so I'll update everybody in the group about that. If you have any interest in contacting him, if you want to do some really long focal length from a dark sky site and you don't want to pay a whole lot of money, he's worked with a couple people from the Fort Worth Astronomical Society in the past, I believe, and I'm surprised I wasn't aware of it, and so I just wanted to make sure everybody else was. And when I've got his information up on the YouTube channel, I'll let you know so that you can decide if that's something you all want to do. I do like the idea that Charles Bracken mentioned of people co-sharing equipment in different hemispheres. I know I have an interest in doing that in the Southern Hemisphere, and that's sort of what I'm working on now. Is I'm trying to just perfect my ability to operate from a remote site by using two telescopes and coordinating them, and eventually move one of them, probably the Pleiades if I don't sell it, to the Southern Hemisphere and use it there. But I really like the idea of club members joining together and doing things like that. So hopefully in the next year or 18 months, maybe we'll see something like that. All right, so this is most likely going to be my last meeting as chairman of the APSIG group. It's been my honor. It's possible I might do another month or two while the new board comes and tries to find a new chairperson. I'm not going to leave the group stranded without a chairman. So if necessary, I will do or I'll coordinate another meeting or two if necessary. But I really do want to see somebody else come in and some new blood introduced and some fresh ideas. But it's been, what I'm trying to say is it's been my honor and pleasure to be the chairman of the APSIG group. And I hope that we've all learned something from each other and that we continue to do that. Thank you very much. All right, and with that, I'm going to conclude our meeting. It's about 9:18. Thank you all. I'll try to get this up on the APSIG YouTube channel tonight, if possible. And clear skies, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Clear skies.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Great job, Stephen.